Uh, you know, Wilder had to deal with a fury of punches. Kim K hosted SNL. That's the type of week end it's been. I told you, Kim K is a role model. Right, J. Cole? Oh, it was a sight to see. Almost like it's for your eyes only. But apparently, uh, count it up, because she is counting it up. Which, by the way, I think she did great on the show. Well, great's a strong word. I think she did pretty well. And I'm not one of those that has a unlikable opinion about her. I actually feel for the most part, she does a lot of good for the world. People want to focus on surgeries, fabrications. But, one sex tape. It's like, all right, she has a sex tape. It's not the biggest deal in the world. We all have one out there somewhere. I have one on this same camera I'm recording on. So, nothing to see here. Welcome to episode 70 of the Often Beat podcast. I'm your host, Clint. I'm recording this at 7:07 on a Monday morning, October 11th. The big 011. But yeah. First, let me just talk about, I'm not a boxing expert, but I'll hit the bag for 5 minutes at the end of my workouts at the gym. By the way, I'm below 250 now. It's weird that I weigh more than Deontay Wilder, but less than Fury. I guess you could say my body's in between. But it's not. Nowhere near in between. But I thought the fight was entertaining as hell. At first, I thought it was going to be over in like the third round just by watching it. I didn't predict it or nothing. But it looked like, Wilder's getting pretty worked. And then he just had I believe he got knocked down first. And then he got back up. Nothing crazy. And then you felt like, man, Fury's got the crazy advantage. And then all of a sudden Wilder comes in there and he starts wilding out without having 8 kids like Nick Cannon. But he was throwing cannons to Tyson Fury's face. And it hit him a couple times. He got knocked down a couple times. He stunned him a few times. The whole fight was entertaining. I'll always, when people want to point out, he's not a technical boxer. His feet were this and this was that. He has no left hand, this and that. I'm just like, you know what? I would rather watch someone that's not as quote unquote technical, even though, obviously there's a lot of people that are quote unquote more technical, but they're not as successful in the ring. Like literally, his only losses are against arguably the best boxer of this generation, heavyweight wise. But people always want to focus on Wilder's not this and that. He's a one-trick pony type of shit. But I will take someone who is less technical or less precise in all these other things and enjoy a fight more than someone who goes 12 rounds and like the match before it when it was like these two dudes. It was like the Cuban striker. Like I think that was his nickname. Some other guy. It was such a conservative fight. And I'm just like, I understand they're good fighters and good boxers. I'm like, this is terrible to watch. I understand boxing's not all about just knockouts. It's not all about this, that, and the other. You can have enjoyment in the quote-unquote sweet science. And it's funny how people always quote sweet science, but don't understand what the sweet science is. I don't either. That's why I never quote it. That's just one of those regurgitated fucking words that we have just abused. Kind of like children. But, neither here nor there. I enjoyed the fight. I think most people did. I don't know if it's like technically the greatest fight of the past decade or nothing, but it's one of the best boxing matches I've seen in a good while, and I've been watching more recently and shit like that. The entertainment value, the activity is the main thing. Like, I appreciate matches that are constantly active. Also, will say this, in boxing, it typically happens with more amateur fighters, like when you see these celebrity matches, I guess, where the refs are always breaking up when they get in the clinch and hold each other, when they throw a punch and they get clinched with each other. God, like, that shit got annoying, but at the same time, him separating them made them actually like fight and throw haymakers. It was a great fight. Now, Kim Kardashian. Talk about a smooth transition, because she threw some haymakers on the show. Honestly, I thought it was pretty well. I thought the show, I don't watch the live show. It's a weird formula they got there. What's the incentive of watching the show live if you were literally going to post every single skit that's on the show on YouTube literally an hour later, if that? Sometimes they'll start posting the skits as the show's going on, or at least live on air. It's just weird to me. Like, I mean, I guess it's working, whatever. But I actually thought she did pretty well. Was she perfect? Like, I mean, yeah, you could see sometimes like low discomfort. You could see she may have got confused reading sometimes, all that. But overall, I would say it was very well put together for her. You know, she's obviously not a professional or expert in this. So for what they were doing, you could tell they well crafted her role and try to make sure she didn't do a lot of moving in the skits. If you ever noticed that, it was pretty standstill, a presenter type, a very, they had her in a lot of like announcer roles, like being a presenter in the skits, like the lotto skit where she's literally just the lotto girl and she just has to put her hand out here with the bachelorette. Jesus Christ. I guess she's a definition of bringing diversity to the bachelorette, since they have a hard time doing it in real life. But whatever. So she you tell like they had her in very read and react things. And so they put her in good position. She performed well. And most of the skits I thought were actually pretty decent. They weren't trash. I don't think there was any that was trash. A couple that's not for me, but for the most part, pretty well. And anyone that just sits there and says it was complete trash, and they'll say, oh, well, there's a more deserving actor, more deserving comedian, more deserving this who deserves, like, yeah, you know what? It's life. You could say, oh, well, this is taking someone else who could have got their name brought up, someone who could have got notoriety for being on the show. It's like, well, also her being on the show gets people who probably wouldn't typically watch the show, because she does have like 88 fucking million followers on Instagram and shit. So for people that want to say, oh, she took a spot away from someone who's, someone who's, they could have put like someone on a sitcom or someone who's kind of well known and could have helped their name. It's like, you know what? Sometimes it's not a show's responsibility to always just have people on the show just to boost their name. Guest stars specifically. Typically the guest star is supposed to bring audience to the show that maybe they wouldn't have. Because reality with the show like that, it's like when you're searching for shows or a podcast specifically. Sometimes it doesn't really matter who the host or it doesn't matter who the host of the show is, right? In terms of a podcast, right? Stay with me. I know it's going to get confusing. But when you're looking for a podcast, you're not going to necessarily watch every single interview that host does. If it's an interview type show, you're going to see, Do I want to listen to this guest? Do I know this guest? Let me read their bio. Do they do something that I'm even interested in? You may watch the same guest on 5 different podcasts in a 3-week stretch when they're going through one of their podcast runs. And then you may never listen to all those shows that they were on until like another 3 months when someone else that you likes on the show. People search for guests that they actually want to hear from. That's the reality of this stuff. And her being on the show, in this situation, not every week are you going to want to watch SNL. Even if the skits turn out to be good. If it's just like some British theater actress who's amazing, but no one really has a invested interest in her, you have never really heard of her, and you may like you may watch one skit and it's okay. It's like, all right, like it's cool. But if you see it's like Justin Timberlake or Owen Wilson or just a consistent person that always performs when you know they're on the show, then yeah, or if it's Dave Chappelle, he has like the most viewed, which he has a lot of views for a lot of different reasons now. Oh, views, kind of like Drake's album. You with me or what? That's what he's asking his audience. And most of his audience, well, they're with him. Hopefully they don't, I guess you could definitely tell they don't feel no ways for other parties. Oh, Jesus Christ, Clint. Jesus Christ. The fire and desire are definitely causing some hotlines to bling. Oh, Jesus. Stop, Clint. Stop. Oh, by the way, when Drake performs, people are going to watch or listen. Anyways. Yes, she may not be, quote unquote, talented in the sense of what she was hosting. There's millions of people probably more qualified in the actress field, in the comedy field, whoever typically would be on the show in that field. But guess what? At the end of the day, it's also kind of a business. You can hate on her for being, an influencer, for always presenting an image that's harmful to young women, which I find that ironic because I don't understand how it's harmful if she's confident in herself, if that's what it's all about. She gets plastic surgery. It's like, all right, you know what? If most people had the money to get plastic surgery, they probably would. At least something. You at least get your teeth done. You may get some nerves in your foot done. I don't know. You may get liposuction. People do a lot of things if they had the money to get certain things. She just has a lot of fucking money to do it. But she brings viewership to a show that obviously is big within itself. And people say, oh, SNL's not funny anymore. It's like, okay, well, they still get 1 million views per skits on YouTube. Someone watches. Somehow, they've been on for 45 years. People keep on watching. There's ebbs and flows. Some years are better. Some shows are better, depending on the host. Sometimes it doesn't matter who the host is. The show's not great. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're not. But look at the number. Like, I remember the show came out yesterday. And I remember there was a couple of skits today, like, came on my recommended. And they already had, like, 1.5 million, 2 million views. Which, not all of skits on SNL hit 1 million views on YouTube. At least that quickly. So, the point is, she brings a recognition. And recognition to the show that when you bring someone on that your typical audience member may not typically watch, but you bring them to watch, and guess what? They may watch next week's, then next week's, then next week's. I don't need to explain this to you, but I thought it was good all around. And it was a good enough quality show where it wasn't a walking embarrassment. You can definitely tell she's not a natural actress. It's like, okay. But they definitely put her in a position to win. Unlike Matt Nagy did for Justin Fields. in his first start. It's funny how that is. By the way, great Sunday. Great Sunday of football. A lot of missed kicks. Um, a lot of weirdness going on, but I liked it. By the way, for people, I don't understand this hate on announcers, specifically the better ones in the business. Like Cris Collinsworth is probably one of the best. Me personally, I think he's one of the best. Like I guess it's called color analysts, where he's breaking down the game. He's the football guy in the booth with Al Michaels. Cris Collinsworth is, like, to me, I think he's one of the better ones. You could argue, maybe, Romo's up there. I have a few slip in my mind, but there's definitely a few that are top of the food chain. These people bitching about, I hate it. Oh, he's so annoying. It's like, how is he annoying? He's better than 90% of the ones that Fox rolls out on their channel. You could definitely tell Cris Collinsworth is seasoned, trained, and everything. But he still has that sense of humor in games that I enjoy. Sometimes when you listen to announcers, it's kind of sometimes too serious, like you are covering a football game. And I like, him and Al, they'll put some little quips in there here and there. They'll criticize. I think what's the beauty about their podcast is that maybe because they're both so big and so established that they don't have to sit here and hold their tongue on things. Like, they may not directly just say, like, oh, the refs suck today, because they don't want to put that type of media scrutiny on the refs, but you could definitely tell they were like, they were like, wow, seems like we have I believe tonight they said, oh, we have it seems like another one of those, huh? Man, it seems like a lot of these games. And then they'll show the replay, like, yeah, I'll just say that's a very questionable call. Like, they'll be generous about it, but you know what they're saying. I don't understand people that hate on Cris Collinsworth. I just think he's funny. I think some people, when they cover a game, they try to be too funny and all this shit, but not actually be in tune with the game. It seems like he has that good balance in between plays. He may make a little joke that make you chuckle. Like, remind yourself, like, this is a football game. This is lighthearted. You're not watching a freaking political convention. Like, it ain't that serious, bro. Even though what's happening on the field can become very, very serious if gone wrong. But in day, football is entertainment. Announcers provide entertainment. And Cris Collinsworth is entertainment. Now, I understand that people were bitching about, he basically chugging Mahomes' $500 million cock down his throat, no matter what, even when he was throwing picks and shit. And then he wouldn't give Josh Allen like any like MVP credit and all this stuff. Like, he's not gonna. It's like, maybe Al brought up like, he's a lot of people are saying maybe MVP by the end of the year. And then Cris Collinsworth was like, well, he's obviously like first 2 years he was, it was average at best. And then last year he was fantastic. And this year it seemed like he was given an honest assessment. Like, yeah, he's starting to get back on the last year track, plus even a little more. Because the first game, 2 out of the first 4 games, he was pretty good. Or 2 out of the first 4 games, you could see he wasn't terrible. It was more of somewhere in the middle of being, problems he had his first couple years, but still showing the positive progressions, but sometimes reverting back to old things. And he said something as simple as when he took a sack going backwards, it's like, look, this is a part of his game. He's gotta fix this because it's too many negative plays. He's a spectacular player. He can make up and make all these plays. he's like, there's a difference, and he was basically trying to get to, there's a difference between extending the play, and sometimes you're going to get sacked, loss on play, stuff happens, but he was talking about specifically when he just starts running backwards, unnecessarily, like just running backwards. It's like, if you have to run 8 yards backwards, you just throw the ball out of bounds. Like, nothing good's going to happen at that point. And Bills fans were all in their fucking feelings about, oh, he's just hating on our quarterback. It's like, no, he's not. It's like, he's saying he's not MVP. It's like, well, technically, if it wasn't for this game, which by the way, he played fucking amazing tonight or last night, technically, he played fucking amazing, like running, throwing, everything. He was just consistent, precise, and everything. But yeah, like before this game, Josh Allen probably technically wouldn't have been like a top 4 MVP candidate just based off what he's played this year, which he hasn't played like below par. He's played a pretty damn good, but not enough where there's plenty of other players who have played probably technically better up to this point in the season. And Mahomes technically was still statistically in every facet still playing kind of better. But I don't understand, like, what is with this hate towards Cris Collinsworth? Or when people just want to bitch about announcers because they don't like the way, oh, they sound biased. It's like, no, that's actually as unbiased as it can get. But whatever. Not going to go down a rabbit hole about that. So I recently watched a Seinfeld, the Seinfeld documentary from 2002, I believe. It may have been, it's like early 2000s, late 90s. It's a documentary called Comedian, which is basically following Jerry Seinfeld. Obviously, he was on the fucking show Seinfeld. I mean, but it's following him getting back into stand-up after doing the show. You know, starting over, new material, all that shit. And I would recommend people go see it. It's on Netflix. You go see it. It's called Comedian. It shouldn't be that hard to find. But what fascinated me, right, about the documentary, because they followed him and they followed this other comedian who still actually performs and is active today, named Orny Adams. And it kind of, it was very cringeworthy to watch the Orny Adams dude, because he was a person who wasn't established yet, but during the documentary, he started to get he got a late night show gig. He started getting better gigs. He got George Shapiro, which was a producer on Seinfeld. So I'm going to assume Seinfeld kind of gave him a little bit of a connection there, being his documentary, like, hey, I'll give you a little bit of connection here to be like your manager type of thing. What fascinated me about the show, about the documentary, what it kind of showed, is the differences between someone who has made it and then some, and the attitude of someone who feels like they deserve more just because they've been doing it X amount of time, just because they put in the work, per se. And also, just to be frank about it, Orny Adams' attitude was just cringeworthy through the whole thing. All he did was talk about how great he is, which is like, okay, confident, not confident, whatever. You could say you have to have that confidence, that you have to believe in yourself and all that stuff. But all he did was talk about anytime someone who would try to help him, like a club manager would watch a set and all this stuff, and they would try to be like, look, your stand-up is great and all this stuff, but no one likes being around you because you're just kind of a dickhead, and it's not even an enjoyable dickhead. It's this unwarranted feeling of yourself. And I think it can relate to real life, because you see how people who have been successful and handled success and all that. And you see people that are guests in the same field, but they have the attitude that they feel like they should be where the top of the, where the top of the field is, like Seinfeld in this case. At the time, he was like basically one of the guys, or the guy. And what was so fucking annoying about the Orny Adams dude, it was just this sense of, who the fuck would want to be around this guy? Like, he did not. And maybe one thing I thought is, maybe for the documentary camera, maybe he played up a little bit, right? Because he knew this documentary was going to get his name out there. So he felt like he had to make a name for himself in terms of, whether people like me or not, I want them to remember me in this sense. But it seemed like he just genuinely was just kind of annoying as a person. Did not take any slight of criticism, even when the people who he wants to be are trying to help him get there. Which is not unheard of if you're younger. I believe he was 28, during this documentary or whatever. Which is not unheard of if you're younger. Yeah, no one likes being told things that they can do better, or things that they can, pointers to get better or whatever it is, because it's something they've put a lot of time in. In his case, he put 6 years in. He had at home, he rewatched the videos, studied himself and all this stuff. Like, he really, obviously took it serious, put a lot of work in. But they were just basically trying to help him. Like, dude, this behavioral thing you're doing, this aura of I'm fucking, I know everything type of thing. Like, you have this I've made it attitude before you made it. And then you have someone like Seinfeld who's flying in private jets, doing a set here in this city in New York, and then he flies out to Las Vegas and does a set, and he's doing sets all night when he's got 50 plus million in the bank at the time, if not more. And he still takes the craft of what he's doing like he's at the bottom. He went in with the attitude when he started over that I'm starting with new material from the bottom. And when you have that type of money and success, and just to humble yourself that in order to get where I want to get with this, you can't have the attitude of this. You like, oh, people are gonna like me just because of who I am. He's like, at the end of the day, if I don't go out there with good stuff, even with my name, they'll give me a couple minutes at the beginning of grace and, oh, Seinfeld's here. But at the end of the day, if it's not good, they're gonna let you know. You can see he's someone who's thinking through he's working through stuff, or he's working through whatever, his material and all this shit. And this guy, Orny, it's just this sense of, he just came off as very unlikable. And I'm not here to shit on his career or nothing, because I believe he's still an active comedian. He's working. You can find him on YouTube and stuff. But to be honest, after watching that documentary, I looked up his name on YouTube and looked at it, and I'm like, I don't even want to see this guy stand up. I don't want to see his newer material, because I would hope he's grown just from being that type of guy. But it kind of showed me that first, it reminds you that your first impressions of someone does matter in that sense, because he can be a completely different guy and all this shit. And during the documentary, he just came off as whiny, as, all my friends have families and this and that. He's like, okay, but are you, sounds like, okay, but are you doing what you love? He's like, well, yeah. He's like, okay, then what are you complaining about? It's like oh, worry about, I'm 28, nothing's going there. He's like, and Seinfeld didn't get his break till it was like what, 30s, mid 30s when he got on Seinfeld or whatever. He's like, and he didn't even bring that up, but he just brought like, if you're doing what you love, who the fuck cares what age you are doing it? If you're so worried about what you're doing at a certain age, if you're worried about what you're doing because you're worried about what other people think of what you're doing, then you're probably not doing the right thing. Because when you're truly obsessed and love something, nothing can stray you away from that. And that documentary, it made me just like, and he was one of those that kind of had the attitude like, oh, like it was amazing because there was a part where he went up on a stage, Orny Adams went up on a stage and performed or whatever, and then, he did it like the small little clip after he did an interview with the doc, and he was just like, yeah, I hate, people don't fucking know, that shit's funny, the crowd sucked, this and that and the, that's the reason why that joke didn't hit, blah, blah, blah. And literally later in the documentary, Seinfeld's in a room with like 4 other comedians, like pretty known ones. A couple of them are slipping my mind right now. I believe Tom Papa was in the room. He had shit. There was a couple others pretty well known ones as well. And they're sitting in a room at a comedy club that they're performing at. They just performed, and they're all sitting. These are all proven comedians, much farther along the progression than the other dude. And they're all sitting there. Ironically, and he's talking about, comedians will always make the excuses like, oh, the crowd's this, like, scented the candles aren't this, the pants I wore today. It's like, no, you just weren't good. You just weren't good that day. That's all it is. And it was funny because right when he said that, all I thought about was earlier in the documentary where the other comedian, was saying, oh, the crowd didn't find my joke funny. That's because they suck. They don't get it. They don't get comedy. I know comedy and all this shit. And they're sitting at the table like, the second, and I believe he even said, the second you think you've made it, the second you think that you know this better than anyone else, is the second you stop being good at it. Because if you can't humble yourself to think that something you do is not good enough or whatever, or the work on some, then your just stuff will deteriorate over time. And it's just the humbleness of the difference between someone who's been through it, had success, and then someone who hasn't had that type of success to it. And I believe it translates to a lot of different, you could translate it to different situations in your life or my life, where you've probably been on both sides of the coin, where you felt like you knew something better than the teacher, where you felt like you understood something better than someone else. Then you realize over time, like, man, I should have listened, or maybe I should have been more, maybe I should have admitted that I was wrong, or that I didn't know it all. Maybe I should have listened to my coaches more. Maybe I should have, taken a step back and just work on what I'm doing more. Whatever it is. But it shows the mindset of someone who was the top of the field at his time, and the other person who, I'm not even one of those people that likes to say, oh, well, look at their career sucks and all this shit. That's not what I'm saying, because he's an active comedian. But I would only assume if he stayed that same behavior, there's a reason why we, on outside of the documentary, haven't really heard of this guy on a more mainstream or national level. I'm not even talking about on Seinfeld's level, but just like on a generic comedian that a lot of people know. Like, I don't think he's that well known. And I think you could see a lot in his approach of why maybe that approach doesn't sustain to make you the best of what you can do. It actually holds you back more. because you think you're a know-it-all. But I don't know. I thought, that documentary really opened my eyes in a lot of ways. It was very cool to see kind of behind the scenes, following what it's like to go through a night of going on spots, of the mindset of trying to start over in something that you've already achieved. Like, imagine if at your job that you've been at for, I don't know, 4 years, and you've gotten pay raises and all this stuff, and you moved up the ranks, and let's say you got like some office job, and you're getting $70,000 a year, which is a pretty good job. And then, you know what? We actually need you to start over to prove that you can do it again. So for the next 6 months, you have to start over where you started at, which was, let's just say, working on the floor, distributing, whatever your job is. And you take a pay cut down to, let's say, $30,000. It's a big pay cut. And let's say you're back working the manual hard labor of the job. And you're down there in the mud specifically. You were literally hands-on. Let's say you're in charge of like a car shop or a car dealership. You're back in the garage, fixing vehicles, holding the flashlight for someone while they're working on stuff. You're out there under it to, make sure the lifts are up. You're out here, like literally like you're being babied, positioned back into it. When just a week ago, a couple weeks ago, a month ago, you were in the office, just racking up checks. Cushiony job, didn't have to get your hands dirty. You're making deals, it's more over the phone. It's more of a customer service, appreciative type of role. And now you're literally back in the garage, moving 8 hours a day like that. Tired as hell when you get off work. Starting over. The humbleness it would have to take for someone to take that step back in order to remind themselves to appreciate what they have. Or to honestly, because sometimes we get to certain places and positions in many different facets of life, and we get there and we kind of become too full of ourselves. We think, oh, we're unfireable. Like, oh, we're too good at our jobs. Everyone else sucks type of thing. Like, oh, they're the ones that don't get it. It's always, they're the ones that don't get it type of mentality. Shut up, phone. And I believe that, where was I at? Oh, yeah. It's like something like we kind of become this mindset that we become a little bit too complacent, that we always think we know everything that's needed to know about this. When you are one bad day away from getting demoted, you're one bad day away from getting fired. You get fired or demoted for a lot of different reasons. How do you handle that? And what if you have to prove and relearn and then learn new stuff and working your way back up to your office position? What if there's some, I don't know, for a Jeep? No, common homeowner here, car owner I should say, but some people live in them. What if there's some new things? Yeah, they've changed Jeeps over time. What if they move the battery from this place to this place? Engine from here, they push it under. Like, whatever parts of a car, anything under the hood, anything under the car, in the car, that you have to learn new. And it's, you have to prove and that the ins and outs, because things change over time. It's like medical. It's like every 3 or 4 years you have to kind of relearn certain things, because medicine is constant. New medical information is constant. Something that applied 3 years ago, there may have been a lot of research done and be like, hey, you know what? If you do this now, it's proven if you do this now, you actually damage someone's lungs when you do certain procedures. So, you know what? Don't do this anymore. I remember in school, in certain like science classes and stuff. We would have nurses that were already nurses and doctors to an extent that already been in the field for like 8 or 10 years, but they're now the hospital paid for it and everything, but they had to spend like a couple semesters in specific classes to relearn things, or to like I guess to make sure you're keeping sharp and keeping on top of your shit. But on top of that, also to make sure you know this new information, because literally the ramifications of you not know this is someone being alive or someone dying. It could be like lawyers. There's laws constantly being changed, procedures in courtrooms and all that shit. Shit changes all the time, loopholes. Something that applied in 1998 doesn't apply now. You gotta constantly be on top of that shit. And really, that documentary is a microcosm. People look at a profession like that, and look, it's definitely a lot funner profession than a lot of professions. And sometimes it can be unfathomable to imagine people making millions of dollars doing it. But the point of it is that you have to go with it with the same approach, that you are constantly learning, you're constantly getting better, you're constantly working on your craft in a sense, adjusting to what audiences react to compared to 1998 to 2012. Audiences are going to react to different things. You have to adjust to that. I just thought it was something that it's one of those documentaries that, yes, it's about comedy, all that shit. But I really feel like a 12-year-old can watch that and a 40-year-old can watch that and take away a similar lesson that can still apply to the time of the lives that they're at. To understand that even the professions that look the funnest and stuff take a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice. And it could be a 40-year-old that can be inspired to, like, you know what, I'm going to pursue this. It could just be 4 looks at this, like, you know what, I need to be more humble in my profession, you know, because I don't want to be this fucking Orny, it's kind of a weird name, this Orny guy who's literally so full of himself, and there's no even proven, like, even if Seinfeld was that fucking annoying and about himself, even with all of his success, watching the documentary, it would make you not like him, even with his success. But especially with this guy, it was like, dude, like, there's no way someone watches that, like, oh yeah, I want to fuck that. Like, oh yeah, that's a guy I would want to go out with. You know, that's a guy I would want to go grab a beer with. Like, nah, this dude just does nothing but talk about himself. This dude does nothing but just think that no one can tell him anything. And no one wants to be around that guy. But I'm assuming he's grown by now. I'm assuming, like, he's matured or whatever. Like, I don't know. But I think a lot of people could take a lot of things from him. So go check out Comedian, the documentary on Netflix. All right. What are we at? 43? Okay. I'll wrap it up then. Okay. That was episode the big 7-0 of the Off and Beat podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and most importantly, suck some titties. Oh, I realize I spoke in a really low voice today. Very low voice. Remember, 249.2 pounds now. Progression. It's all that matters. Look at the biceps. Ooh, 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 daddy. All right, guys. Have a great day. Don't forget to wax your mom's coochie today.